There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Revelation. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. But these standing here before God at the white throne judgment, it doesn't turn out the same way. And this will not be anything like a trial. So it's not like going to court, and no one's going to be able to go there and defend themselves or have something to say to establish any kind of fact like a courtroom, because everyone who's standing here has already been condemned. Now it's just to determine what their sentence will be. And what it seems like, and I kind of make this stuff up, but what it seems like and it looks like to me is it looks like there's these two tables there. It doesn't say anything about tables. That's just how I picture it in my mind. But there are these two tables there, and on one table, there's this pile of books, because it says books, and it says it in the plural form. So there's a lot of books. And on the other table, there's just one book, and it's singular because it says book, and it says it in the singular, and it says that book is called the Book of Life. And it's open. And so all these people standing there, none of their names are written in that one book. And so they're judged by the books on the other table. That's recorded everything in their life. And they're opened, and it shows all their works, and they'll be judged by what they've done, good or bad. Because there will be different degrees of punishment for these people, just like there will be different degrees of rewards for believers at the judgment seat of Christ. But there will be no believer standing at this judgment, and no believer will ever be judged by any of these books, because in these books, there's nothing written about them. Everything about them has been erased. The only thing that's written about them is in the other book, and all that's written there is their name, in the Book of Life. But in those books that all the non-believers are judged by, there will not be one good work that will ever give them entrance into heaven, because heaven isn't earned by works. It's given, and it's freely given by Jesus. And it's all because of the work He performed in our behalf on the cross, dying in our place. And so it's just like how Jesus had explained it when He was asked, well, what shall we do that we may do the works of God? And Jesus, His answer was, this is the work of God, that you believe in Him who He sent, because that's the only work you can do to get into heaven, by believing in Jesus. And that means that you're believing that He is the Christ and believing on Him, that He will save you. And that's it. And none of these people standing here before the white throne, none of these people did that. So everybody here will be accountable to all the truths that they've heard about God and about Jesus their whole life. And then all of these standing here will also be thrown into the lake of fire. They're going to be assigned to the degree of punishment that they deserve. And it's all because of a lifelong rejection of Jesus. And there are many who don't hold a biblical view of Christianity, who try to convince people that a loving God would never send anyone to hell or to the lake of fire. And they think that the view of God that I'm describing is very unchristian-like, but they're wrong. It is very Christian, and God is a very loving God. He did everything possible at the cost of Himself to keep this from happening to anyone. And Jesus Himself, He taught this view as truth. And He taught it in Matthew 18, in Matthew 23, in Matthew 25, and again He taught it in Mark chapter 9. But what God will not do, God would never overstep anyone's free will or force anyone to love Him. because there would be no value in that, in a forced love. And God made us in his image, so he made us free. He made us like himself, and he gave us a choice. So God, he doesn't really send people to the lake of fire. People, they actually send themselves, and it's by the rejecting of his son. And then the very last thing that's thrown into the lake of fire is death and Hades. And so death and Hades will be eternally burned up, because these are the last remnants of sin. There will be no possibility of sin or to be able to sin going into this new heaven and new earth. Death and Hades will be removed forever with no possibility of ever returning. So if you're worried that you might not be in this first resurrection, here is a scripture that you find in John 5:24, and it says, "He that hears my word and believes on him that sent me has everlasting life, and shall not come into condemnation, but has passed from death into life." So last week we covered what's probably the hardest chapter in the Bible that affects all people, believers and non-believers. It's that chapter that comes back to our minds that troubles all of us, about that lake of fire where God judges and executes his sentencing on all those who have hated him and have sinned against him, where they have no remorse. All of those people who could have been forgiven, but they rejected God's forgiveness and rejected his salvation. That cost him everything. It cost him everything he had. It cost him God's son's very own life. And God, he loved those people so much. And he was just looking for any reason to not judge these people. But now it's Jesus here who was sitting on that great white throne. That was last week. But now with that behind us, we go forward to get a glimpse of these realities of this new heaven and new earth that's been promised throughout the scriptures. And like it says in Isaiah 65:17, "For behold, I create new heavens and new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create, a Jerusalem as a rejoicing, and her people a joy." And it also talks about this in 2 Peter 3:12, where it says, "The heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with a fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heaven and a new earth in which righteousness dwells." There's a lot of fear with some people when they start to think about what's next. And they think, what happens to us after this life? Is there life after death? And what will that life look like? And the great thing about our God and about Christianity is that we're told what's coming next. So we don't have to have this fear about being swallowed up into some type of black hole or some abyss, because we know what happens. And so John, he goes on and he describes what he's seeing. And he describes what's in store for us with all these beautiful descriptions. And it's kind of hard to picture this in our minds because we've never seen anything like this in the way that he's describing it. But there's also a lot of comfort in John's description, because as John describes the things he sees, we get to see that there's a lot of things that we already know about. There's things here that we have already seen here, like you have cities with walls that have foundations and streets, and there's measurements. And these are all the things familiar to us in our cities. And then he describes these park-like settings with rivers and trees. And so even though we've never seen anything like this, it will all be familiar. We'll be comfortable there, and we'll feel at home, knowing that this has been made by the same God who made this heaven and earth, and who had us in mind when he made this city. And I don't know how many of us have ever gone away to college or into the military, or maybe have moved into a new town. But I would say that we all went to school and may have felt some anxiety, wondering, will I know where to go? How will I get around? And so we study the maps or the brochures, of the campus, and we try to get a familiarity of where we're going so that we can have some confidence that things will turn out all right. And that's exactly what we have here. John is giving us a brochure. It's like a travel brochure. It's a description of the things that you will be seeing on your paradise vacation, or it's the plans of your newly built dream home. And then John tells us what he sees. And what he sees first is he sees a new heaven and a new earth. And then he tells us what he doesn't see. And he doesn't see the old heaven or the old earth anywhere around. And he also doesn't see any sea. So this is not a remodel. This is all new construction. And some people think that it's just going to be a remake of the same heaven and the same earth, because the word new here in Greek is that word kain, which means new in character or fresh. But the word used in that passage that we had first read from Isaiah 65, where God said, "For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth," which is speaking about this same act of creation. The word create in Hebrew is the word bara, which means to create out of nothing. So this is a new creation. It's all new, and it's all created from nothing. And so the first thing I think, well, I'm going to miss the sea because I like going to the beach, and I like seeing the sunsets and all these things in this world that have given us so much beauty. And I know, like, when I go to the ocean and I look out and I see how vast it is, or it's the same as like when I look at the sky and I think of God, and I think of him as being the creator, and how small I really am and how great he really is. But we don't need to get hung up here, because I'm sure we're not going to miss the sea, and we're not going to miss anything about this world, even as wonderful as it is. And not to freak you all out, but in this new creation, there's also no sun. So those sunsets aren't really going to happen anymore. And a lot of the description of the greatness of this new heavens and new earth, they're found in what it doesn't have. Because this new creation and this new heaven and earth, they won't have any tears or sorrows. They'll have no pain or death. And this new Jerusalem, it will have no temple, no sacrifice, no sun, no moon, but also no darkness. And it'll also have no sin. But even with all these things that the new creation won't have, there's no case for alarm, because everything that we're going to be getting is all upgrades. Now, me and Rebecca, we've been blessed by God with many wonderful homes. They were all foreclosures, or they were sold for the price of a foreclosure, and they were all fixer-uppers. And we had homes in the mountains of California. We've had houses on lakes, and many of you know we're in the middle of a sale of our home in Hawaii. And all my kids, they get nervous when one of our houses start to begin to look too good. Dad's going to sell it.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.